Buying a luxury car is the easy part. Keeping it alive is where the pain begins. Because some of these cars are not just expensive, they are relentless. One repair bill can hit hard, a few months of maintenance can get ugly, and if the wrong part fails, your wallet may never recover. That is the trap with luxury cars. They look incredible, they feel expensive, and they destroy people slowly. So today, we're counting down 10 luxury cars that will destroy your wallet. Number 10. BMW 7 Series. On the surface, the BMW 7 Series looks like a smart luxury buy. It is elegant, comfortable, full of technology, and carries the kind of executive image that makes people think the owner has everything under control. And that is exactly why it can be dangerous. Because the 7 Series does not usually destroy your wallet in one dramatic moment, it does it slowly, through expensive electronics, high-end components, suspension parts, labor costs, and the kind of repairs that sound manageable at first, until they start stacking on top of each other. That is the real trap with cars like this. When it is new, the 7 Series feels brilliant. Quiet cabin, premium materials, serious road presence, and enough performance to make it feel like far more than just a luxury sedan. It gives you that full flagship experience. The comfort, the status, the technology, the confidence. But once age starts creeping in, all of that sophistication becomes expensive to keep alive. And that is where owners start feeling the pain. Because this is not a simple car. It is loaded with features, complex systems, and premium engineering, which sounds great when everything is working. The problem starts when even one of those systems decides not to cooperate. Suddenly, you are not dealing with a normal repair bill anymore. You are dealing with flagship car money. The worst part is that the 7 Series still makes people want to keep it. It still looks expensive. It still feels important. It still drives like a real luxury car. So owners keep justifying the next repair, and then the next one after that. What makes the BMW 7 Series so dangerous for your wallet is not that it is a bad car. It is that it is a very good car with very expensive problems once time catches up to it. And that is exactly what makes it the perfect way to open this list. At number 9, the Audi A8 is one of those cars that can trick people very easily. Because on the surface, it feels like the perfect luxury sedan for someone who wants class without showing off. It is quiet, elegant, beautifully built, and far more understated than something like an S-Class or a 7 Series. And that low-key image is exactly what makes it dangerous. The A8 does not scare buyers the way some other luxury cars do. It looks sensible, it feels mature. It carries that polished German confidence that makes people believe ownership will be easier than it really is. But that is where the problem starts. Because once this car gets older, the repair side of the story can become brutally expensive. The technology, the electronics, the suspension, the comfort systems, the little premium details that make the car feel so special when it is new, all of that can turn into serious money later. And with a car like this, the bills rarely stay small for long. That is what makes the A8 such a dangerous ownership car. It does not look like a financial mistake. It looks like a smart luxury decision. And that is exactly how people get trapped. When everything is working, the A8 feels fantastic. The cabin is quiet, the ride is smooth, the materials feel expensive, and the whole thing gives off the kind of premium atmosphere Audi has always been good at. It has that clean, controlled luxury feel that ages well visually, even when the ownership costs do not. And that is why people keep holding on to them. They still feel expensive. They still look expensive. They still drive like proper flagship cars. So owners convince themselves the next repair is worth it, then the next one, then the next one after that. What makes the Audi A8 so brutal for your wallet is not that it is flashy or unreliable in some cartoonish way. It is that it hides its financial pain behind elegance. It stays classy, while the ownership costs quietly start piling up. And that makes it one of the easiest cars on this list to underestimate. At number 8, the Mercedes-Benz S-Class. This is the kind of car that makes people believe expensive ownership will feel worth it forever. And for a while, it does. Because when the S-Class is new, it is very easy to understand why people fall for it. The cabin feels rich, the ride feels effortless, the whole car seems to glide over the road, and everything about it gives off that unmistakable flagship feeling. It does not just feel like a luxury sedan, it feels like the standard everyone else is still trying to catch. That is exactly what makes it dangerous later. Because the better a car feels when it is new, the harder owners try to justify keeping it once the bills start hitting. And with an S-Class, those bills do not stay polite for very long. This is not a simple luxury car. It is packed with expensive technology, comfort systems, electronics, high-end materials, and the kind of engineering that feels incredible when everything works properly. But once the car gets older, that same sophistication becomes the reason the ownership experience can get painfully expensive. And that is where the S-Class starts destroying wallets. Not in one dramatic explosion, not in one ridiculous supercar-style repair bill. It does it the luxury way. One issue here, another warning light there, a suspension problem, an electronic fault, a comfort feature that suddenly stops feeling comfortable because it now needs expensive attention. And the worst part is that the car still feels worth saving. That is the trap, because even after the costs begin, the S-Class still looks like success. It still rides like something far above ordinary traffic. It still gives the owner that feeling of importance every time the door closes. So people keep spending on it because they do not feel like they are maintaining a car. They feel like they are protecting an experience. What makes the Mercedes-Benz S-Class so brutal for your wallet is not that it is a bad luxury sedan. It is that it is such a good one. People keep paying far more than they should just to hold on to the feeling it gives them. And that is exactly why it earns its place on this list. At number 7, the Porsche Cayenne. This is the point where luxury starts blending with a different kind of financial pain. Because the Cayenne is one of those vehicles that makes people feel like they are buying the smart version of an expensive car. It has the badge, the speed, the comfort, the status, and the everyday usability. On paper, it sounds almost too perfect, and that is exactly how people get pulled in. Because the Porsche Cayenne does not feel reckless when you buy it. It feels sensible for something this expensive. It is practical enough to drive every day, fast enough to feel exciting, and premium enough to make the owner feel like they bought into something genuinely special. But the problem starts once the ownership reality catches up. This is still a Porsche, still a high-end luxury SUV, still loaded with expensive parts, complicated systems, and the kind of engineering that feels incredible when everything is fresh, and painfully expensive when things stop being fresh. That is where the wallet damage begins. Not because the Cayenne is some terrible car. It is actually the opposite. It is a very good car, and that is what makes it such a dangerous one to own. When a luxury vehicle still drives beautifully, still looks sharp, and still feels expensive years later, owners keep spending on it far longer than they probably should. That is the trap. Because a Cayenne rarely loses its appeal overnight. It keeps giving the owner just enough reason to stay loyal. The badge still means something. The cabin still feels premium. The performance still feels strong. So the maintenance bills, repair costs, and premium parts pricing get tolerated longer than they would on almost any ordinary SUV. And that patience gets expensive. What makes the Porsche Cayenne so brutal for your wallet is the way it hides high ownership pain behind a package that still feels desirable for far too long. It stays fast, premium, and genuinely enjoyable, even while the costs start rising in the background. And that is exactly why so many owners end up spending far more than they ever planned. At number 6, the Range Rover. This is where the list gets more dangerous, because the Range Rover is one of those cars people keep buying even after hearing all the warnings. And honestly, that tells you everything. Because the Range Rover has always been incredibly good at one thing, making the owner feel like the pain will be worth it. It has the image, the comfort, the road presence, the luxury, and that quiet sense of status that makes a lot of other SUVs feel ordinary. When it is working properly, it feels expensive in exactly the right way. That is the problem. A car like this is very easy to fall in love with, and once that happens, logic usually starts losing. The Range Rover does not just sell transportation, it sells atmosphere. It sells the feeling of sitting higher than everyone else, arriving somewhere with presence, and moving through the world in something that feels both luxurious and important. And when a car gives people that feeling, they become far more willing to tolerate the bills that come with it. Those bills can get ugly, because once these vehicles age, the ownership story often gets a lot less glamorous. Suspension issues, electrical problems, expensive modules, air suspension repairs, labor costs, and premium parts pricing can all start turning a beautiful luxury SUV into a very expensive habit. And the worst part is, none of it sounds shocking on its own. It is the accumulation that hurts. That is how the wallet gets destroyed. Not by one dramatic disaster every time, but by a steady stream of expensive problems that slowly wear the owner down, while the vehicle still looks good enough to keep justifying the next repair. And that is the real trap with the Range Rover. It keeps feeling worth saving. It still looks elite. It still has presence. It still gives the owner that luxury SUV image people pay for in the first place. So the spending continues. What makes the Range Rover so brutal for your wallet is the gap between how good it feels when everything is right and how expensive it can become once things start going wrong. It is not just a luxury SUV. It is one of the clearest examples of how a beautiful ownership experience can quietly turn into a financial drain. At number 5, the BMW X7. This is where luxury starts getting big enough to hide the damage for a while. Because the BMW X7 has a very convincing kind of appeal. It looks expensive, it feels expensive, and it carries that full-size luxury SUV image a lot of buyers want the moment they feel ready to move up in life. It has the size, the comfort, the technology, the presence, and the badge. On the outside, it looks like success, and that is exactly why it becomes so easy to underestimate. The X7 does not scare people the way exotic cars do. It looks practical enough to justify. It feels modern enough to trust. And because it is a BMW, a lot of buyers assume they are getting something premium, polished, and manageable, until the ownership side starts reminding them what kind of vehicle this really is. Because this is still a massive, high-end luxury SUV loaded with expensive electronics, premium comfort features, complicated systems, and the kind of parts pricing that can turn a simple visit to the workshop into a painful conversation. The more equipment the car has, the more impressive it feels when new, and the more expensive it can become when those features start aging. That is where the wallet damage begins. Not because the X7 is always falling apart in dramatic fashion, but because everything around it is expensive by default. Big tires, big brakes, premium components, luxury car labor rates, high-tech convenience features. It all adds weight to the ownership experience, and eventually, that weight lands on the owner's bank account. And the worst part is that the car still makes sense emotionally. That is what keeps people hooked. The X7 still gives them that high-riding luxury feel. It still has road presence. It still feels like the kind of vehicle that tells the world they made it. So instead of stepping away when the bills start growing, many owners keep feeding the thing because they do not want to lose the experience. What makes the BMW X7 so brutal for your wallet is not just that it is expensive to own. It is that it hides those costs behind a package that still feels worth defending. It stays comfortable, imposing, and desirable long enough to convince people the next bill will be the last one. And a lot of the time, it is not. At number 4, the Mercedes-AMG G63. This is where the list stops pretending to be subtle, because the G63 does not just cost a lot to buy, it keeps finding new ways to cost you money after the purchase. And it does all of that while making you feel like walking away would be a mistake. That is what makes it so dangerous. The G63 has one of the strongest images in the luxury car world. It looks expensive, feels powerful, and carries the kind of road presence that turns even normal traffic into a stage. People do not buy it because it is practical in the usual sense. They buy it because it feels like success with edges. And once that feeling gets into someone's head, the bills become easier to excuse. That is where the wallet damage starts getting serious. Because this is not some simple off-road truck anymore. It is a high-performance luxury machine with a twin-turbo V8, massive wheels, expensive tires, high-end brakes, complex electronics, and the kind of premium service costs that make ordinary SUVs feel cheap. Even basic upkeep sits at a different level. And once repairs or aging-related issues start showing up, the cost of ownership can get ugly very quickly. Fuel does not help either. Neither do the tires. Neither does the maintenance. Neither does the image tax that comes with owning something this high profile. And that image tax is real. Because the G63 is one of those vehicles people keep spending on far longer than they should, simply because it still looks like money. It still sounds expensive. It still gives the owner that heavy, high-status feeling every time they climb into it. So instead of asking whether the next bill makes sense, they ask whether they are willing to lose the car. That is a dangerous mindset when the car in question is this expensive to keep happy. What makes the Mercedes-AMG G63 so brutal for your wallet is not just the purchase price. It is the fact that everything around the ownership experience feels oversized. The costs, the maintenance, the fuel, the replacement parts, the whole thing. And because the vehicle never stops feeling special, owners keep paying for the feeling long after they should have stepped away. At number 3, the Porsche Panamera. This is where the list gets even more dangerous, because the Panamera makes financial pain feel almost reasonable, and that is a serious problem. Because the Panamera is exactly the kind of car that convinces people they are not making an emotional purchase. It looks sharp, drives like something genuinely special, carries real Porsche prestige, and still has enough practicality to feel smarter than a two-door exotic. That is how a lot of owners talk themselves into it. They think they are buying the grown-up version of a dream car. What they do not always think about is what happens after the honeymoon period. Because once this car gets older, the same things that make it feel so expensive and impressive can start turning into the reason ownership gets painful. Complex electronics, high-end suspension systems, performance hardware, premium parts, specialist labor, and the general cost of keeping a Porsche luxury performance car in top shape can add up fast. And the Panamera has a very specific way of trapping people. It keeps reminding them how good it is. That is what makes it worse than an ordinary expensive car. If a vehicle starts feeling cheap or disappointing, owners walk away more easily. But the Panamera does not usually do that. It still feels fast. It still feels premium. It still feels like something engineered with real purpose. So when the bills come in, owners do not always see them as warning signs. They see them as the cost of protecting something special. That mindset gets expensive quickly, because this is not just a luxury sedan, and it is not just a performance car, it is both, which means you are not paying ordinary maintenance money, and you are definitely not paying ordinary repair money once things start aging. You are paying to keep a complicated, high-status, high-performance Porsche feeling like a Porsche. That is where the wallet damage gets brutal. What makes the Porsche Panamera so dangerous is the way it keeps justifying itself long after the ownership costs start getting ugly. It is too good, too polished, and too rewarding to let go of easily. And that is exactly why so many owners end up spending far more than they ever planned. At number 2, the Bentley Continental GT. This is where luxury stops pretending to be sensible, because the Bentley Continental GT is the kind of car people buy with their heart first, and then spend years trying to justify with logic. It is gorgeous, powerful, prestigious, handcrafted, and soaked in the kind of old-world luxury that makes almost everything else feel ordinary. The problem is, cars like this do not just ask for money once, they keep asking for it, and owners keep saying yes. That is what makes the Continental GT so brutal for a wallet. On the surface, it feels like the complete package: massive power, rich interior, serious badge value, and the kind of road presence that makes people instantly understand it is expensive. It does not need to scream. It already looks like a rolling financial commitment. But once the ownership reality settles in, the beautiful part starts getting expensive fast, because this is still a Bentley, a heavy, high-performance, ultra-luxury grand tourer built with premium materials, complex engineering, big brakes, expensive tires, advanced electronics, and parts pricing that lives in a completely different world from ordinary cars. Even simple maintenance is not simple anymore. Everything around the car carries a premium, and the moment something serious goes wrong, the numbers can turn ugly very quickly. That is where the pain starts becoming real. And the worst part is, the Continental GT never really stops feeling worth it. That is the trap. It still looks stunning. It still sounds expensive. It still makes the owner feel like they bought something truly special. So the next bill gets explained away, then the next one, then the next. Because at this level, owners are not just paying to keep a car on the road. They are paying to keep an image, a feeling, and a certain level of lifestyle alive. What makes the Bentley Continental GT so dangerous is not just that it is expensive to buy. It is that it stays desirable long after the ownership costs start becoming painful. It keeps rewarding the owner just enough to make walking away feel wrong. And that is exactly how a beautiful grand tourer turns into a financial punishment. At number 1, the Rolls-Royce Phantom. This is the point where expensive stops sounding serious enough. Because the Rolls-Royce Phantom is not just a luxury car. It is the kind of machine that changes the financial rules the moment it enters your life. Buying one is already a huge commitment. Keeping one happy is where things become truly absurd. And that is exactly why it takes the number 1 spot. The Phantom sits in a different world from most of the cars on this list. It is larger, more prestigious, more handcrafted, more exclusive, and far more expensive to maintain once real ownership begins. This is not the kind of car you buy because it makes sense on paper. You buy it because you want the absolute top level of presence, comfort, and status. That decision comes with consequences, because everything around a Phantom costs more. The parts cost more, the labor costs more, the materials cost more. Even the basic idea of maintenance exists at a different level. And that is before anything major goes wrong. This is not the type of car where owners casually shrug off a repair and move on. The bills here can feel surreal, because the entire car was built to a standard that ordinary luxury cars do not even try to reach. When something needs attention, you are not paying normal luxury car money anymore. You are paying Rolls-Royce money. That is a completely different kind of pain. And yet, the Phantom keeps people emotionally trapped better than almost anything else. That is what makes it so destructive, because this car never stops feeling special. The cabin still feels like a private sanctuary. The ride still feels unreal. The image still feels untouchable. Even years later, It keeps giving the owner enough of that rare, top-level experience to make the next bill feel easier to justify than it should. That is how wallets get destroyed at this level. Not just through one giant payment, but through the fact that the car keeps convincing its owner that no downgrade would feel acceptable afterward. What makes the Rolls-Royce Phantom the most brutal car on this list is not just that it is expensive, it is that every part of the ownership experience lives in a different financial universe, while the car itself stays so desirable that walking away feels almost impossible. And that is exactly how a masterpiece turns into a money pit, with a spirit of ecstasy on top. And those were 10 luxury cars that will destroy your wallet. And honestly, my opinion is pretty simple. Most of these cars are not bad cars at all. That is actually the problem. A lot of them are brilliant to drive, beautiful to look at, and incredibly hard to let go of once you get used to what they offer. That is exactly why people keep spending on them longer than they should. If you are rich enough to treat the bills like background noise, then maybe that pain does not matter much. But for most people, it matters a lot, because there is a big difference between buying an expensive car and being able to afford everything that comes after it. That is where a lot of owners get trapped. So if I had to give one honest opinion, it would be this: never buy a luxury car just because you can afford the purchase price. Buy it only if you can comfortably survive the ownership. Now I want to hear from you. Which one of these cars do you think is the biggest financial trap? Drop it in the comments and subscribe for more.